Hi, everyone. It's Ken Rakowski, and this is Metal Mentoring, where we take one of the speakers from Saturday and we spend time with them. We dive into their psyche, the way they think, and we are here to learn from them. This week, I'm super excited to have Tom Bilyeu join us. Tom, of course, is one of the co-founders of Request and now Impact Theory, which has got a huge voice across the world when it comes to personal development and, of course, upping yourself to the next level. Tom has shared some inside stuff. Apparently, he likes Japanese comics, but that's another conversation we could get into. And it's great to have Tom Bilyeu join us. Hey, Tom.
Hello, man. Thanks for having me.
So, Tom, I want to start with this. I want you right now to give us a single answer, single word for each one of these things. First, how are you feeling right now mentally, right now?
Clear.
How do you feel physically?
Strong.
And how do you feel in life right now?
Warm. I have no idea. I'd have to dig deep to figure out why that was the answer, but you said one word, so there it is.
You did it, and that's where you're going. So, Tom, I do want us to talk about first, you are an entrepreneur. You are a serial entrepreneur. And when you meet somebody that wants to become an entrepreneur, saying, hey, it's time, I feel it, what do you talk to them about? Do you talk them out of it first? Do you test them, or do you tell them the trials and tribulations of what it's like to be an entrepreneur?
That is a case-by-case basis. I don't try to talk anybody out of it. What I want them to focus on is what are the realities of being good at that, because they are universal. So there are universal principles to success. There is a way to think, a way to be. And because I am such a believer that entrepreneurs are made, not born, I want to arm anybody that's going into that with that set of tools. It's like, I can feel myself just wanting to talk fast. It's like, look, there are like 12 things. If you do these 12 things, you're going to be fine. And so I'm always trying to get them across as quickly as I can, because I really do think as long as you sort of meet what I call minimum requirements, you can do it. It's gruelingly difficult. So one of the first things that I ask people is, do you want this thing badly enough to get kicked in the face over and over and over? If you do, then this could be a great ride. If you don't, then you might want to think about something else.
You're very fortunate because your wife, your partner, is 100% supportive of you. And that's one of the most vital assets, isn't it? To have a supportive partner.
Yeah, for me, look, I think it is possible to do on your own, but as a social animal, I think it will just always be more fun to do with somebody. And then because none of us are going to be able to generate all of the right ideas, to have a talented sounding board that can push you to think more clearly, or to even at times just give you better ideas is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, but again, she's supportive, meaning she knows that it's going to take sometimes 15, 18, 20 hours a day to do things when you're starting off. She wasn't pulling you saying, you need to be dad right now. You need to be husband right now. She was supportive. That does not always happen. And that's where one of the biggest failures happen, is when the partner is not there to support the vision.
Yeah, you'll even see that in weight loss, where somebody's getting lean and the other person's not loving, how that reflects on the relationship. And so, yeah, a relationship can make or break the trajectory of your life. I will remind anybody who's, watching this that ultimately, though, that's in your control. So I never would have stayed in a dysfunctional relationship, and I get a lot of flack for that. For me, it's like, if she wasn't supportive, I would have flipped a switch and been like, okay, I'm done. So, I feel very fortunate to have found a true life partner, and I am beyond grateful that she supports me. But make no mistake, that is by design, and I would not have been in a relationship that wasn't that way.
I'm going to go to Akira, who's sitting in Estonia right now. Akira, that was one of the essential keys between you and your wife, was she was 100% supportive of what you're doing.
Yeah, I've been super fortunate about that. I mean, we got into a relationship, started a business within a month that's still running, and we're still in a relationship.
And you're on the other side of the planet right now in freezing cold in Tallinn.
That's right. Yeah, it's about 3 degrees Celsius here.
Yeah, I have a feeling you're coming back to the West Coast. That's just my perception. Am I right?
You're either psychic or you are, you're very intuitive as well, Ken. But yeah, you're right. We actually just bought a ticket to head back. It's been kind of tough on our son, even though it's really magical here too. But we're heading back.
Maybe I was with Joe Polishaw last weekend and he told me. Maybe it was Joe who told me everything.
Fucking rat.
So, but let's go back. Hey, Tom, and I mentioned this idea of a supportive partner, supportive team too, because I've noticed also the people that work with you, please don't take this wrong, but it's like they drink your Kool-Aid.
Yeah. So I think every entrepreneur has a secret sauce that's like their thing. And for some people, they're an amazing marketer, or maybe they're a great product guy. For me, it's always been the ability to galvanize a large group of people and get them pointed in the same direction. So, look, I've always gotten disproportionate returns from verbal things. So I leaned into that leadership, figuring out how to communicate ideas, how to intoxicate people with certainty. And then just to lead from the front and, outwork people so that they, if I ask somebody to do something, they know that I'm not asking them to do something I wouldn't do myself. And then uplifting people. I want people to feel better about themselves when they're around me than they do when they're not. And that goes a really long way towards keeping a group of people. And our edict is, I want people to retire at Impact Theory. So that's, in a world where the average millennial stays in a job for 18 months, that's very counterintuitive. And so we do a lot of things to keep them on board, including, and this is the thing, the Kool-Aid that gets, imbibed the most aggressively, is wanting them to take responsibility for their work, for their life, to improve themselves. And I'm more than happy to, sort of give them the car that they can go dent. I ask that they not total it. But you give them a chance to see if their ideas actually work, and people get really excited about that. So we are a culture not of Tom, we're a culture of self-improvement and mindset. And so because people can get into that as a very selfish act and they don't even have to think about me or worry about me, they go pretty hard on that.
Guys, Tom Bilyeu is joining us. If you have a question, comment, or anything, put inside the chat, and then we'll go to you. This is your time to go where you may have wanted to ask Tom a certain question, but he's here. Tom, I met you because you popped in my studio of Business Rockstars. I got to meet you there. You were deep in the heart of Quest.
Yeah, I remember that first meeting.
Quest Nutrition, and you lived it. You live the brand you're with. It's 100% you. And
yeah, no question.
You were at that pivotal point where you go, God, is this challenging? I introduced you to Lizanne Falsetto, who was doing Think Thin. She was going in a different direction, what you guys were doing. And everyone seemed to have questions. They had personal beliefs that it's going to work, but the market factors were against you guys. How do you challenge yourself when market conditions are against you to say, I'm going to beat this?
There's a couple things. So one, I am a big believer that success is not guaranteed, but the struggle is. And a lot of times you'll hear the question asked, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I actually think that's the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is, what would I do and love every day, even if I was failing? And so we stepped into Quest from that perspective was, I don't know if this is going to work. I, have reasons to believe it's got a shot. But at the end of the day, I believe in what we're doing, and I'm going to make sure that I optimize for my enjoyment. And if you combine business savvy, because if you don't have that, you're dead in the water. But if you combine business savvy with a mission, like something you really, really believe in, and then the day-to-day fight, the thing that you actually do on a daily basis is enjoyable, now all of a sudden, like, you can show up and work your ass off for that. And if you sprinkle in a little bit of what I call the relentless problem solver, and you just show up every day saying, I love what I'm doing, I believe in why I'm doing it, and I'm just about solving problems. Like, that's what I do. I solve problems, nonstop violence. And then it's, your ego isn't tied up in being right. You just want the right answer. So on a long enough timeline, it's like it works itself out, because you begin to go, well, this is working, this isn't, stop doing that, do more of this. And it's what I call the physics of progress. It's relatively straightforward. It's just most people can't get their emotions out of the way long enough to see clearly what the real answer is, or they aren't, like, I'm psychotic about avoiding a mortality event so that you can stay in business long enough to solve the riddle. And the reason Quest grew as fast as it did was because we not only were pursuing the right thing for the right reason, we were doing it in the right way, meaning we became our own manufacturer at the right time. We understood social media before anybody else. So I don't want anyone to think, oh, I just thought my way to the second fastest growing company. I thought my way to 57,000% growth. That stuff was a reflection of a good idea at the right time. And getting the timing right is really, really hard, which is why I'm always trying to get people, instead of focusing on magical timing, focus on being a problem solver so that you stay in business long enough to be doing the right thing at the right time.
Keith Montgomery.
Yeah, I'm off mute. Okay. Tom, you said business savvy. What do you mean by business savvy?
So you've got to know basic stuff. And I imagine anybody in this room, like, this will seem very self-evident to you guys, but understand, for the vast majority of people who start companies, they don't understand the following. All a company is the ability to create something for a price that you can sell it for more than it costs you to make it. And like, the fact that people don't really get that, they don't understand basic things like cash flow. They don't understand things like create value. Like, people will make a product in isolation with no sense of who their market is, no sense of what they're trying to do to serve their market. So there's like all these really basic things that people don't understand. And then the most fundamental, which is, I've been in 3 industries in my life. I started in software. Well, technically I started in film, then I went to software, then I went to nutrition, and now I'm back in media. So I've come full circle, but I've had 3 totally divergent areas, and I found success in all 3. Now, the reason that I found success in all 3 is because business is about thinking a certain way. I could give you literally decision by decision the playbook for how we built Quest. And if you try it today, you will fail. Why? Because it's already been done. People have already used this as case studies. Everybody's using the same things, right? Social media wasn't even called social media when we kicked it off. So it's like all the things that were revolutionary when we did it. Hey, go on, again, it wasn't called social media, but go on social media, find influencers. They weren't called that. Give them free product, get them to talk about your product, build community, all that. That was a playbook we ran, and it blew us up. If you tried that today, you're now competing with everybody. Everybody knows that playbook. So my thing is, that's not the name of the game. The name of the game is, how does a CEO think? How does an entrepreneur think? How do you have to think and act when you know you can't predict the future? None of us, I mean, if you would have, you are way ahead of me. None of us would have predicted COVID. But when it happened, you adjust. But if you don't have the mentality of, oh, I know how to think through a problem I've never seen before, then you're going to be dead in the water. And so when I say business savvy, it's like, you've got to be able to conceptualize what business is from the most fundamental block of make something for less than you sell it for, to cash flow and how it works, to serving an audience, to change is inevitable. And so you've got to be willing to move. There's just like a basic way of thinking that entrepreneurs don't spend any time doing. So I created this thing called Impact Theory University. I'm not going to teach you how to be a copywriter. I'm not going to teach you the latest trends in marketing. I'm going to teach you how to think like a CEO, because I don't know what's going to happen to you. I don't even know what industry you're in, but I know every CEO thinks like this.
I like it. Rick, go for it.
Yeah, actually your response has changed my question, but I'll ask the question, then give the follow-up question to it. The first one was, what were the influences that shaped impact theory? But more importantly, now that you're at a different place, what are the things influencing you in terms of dealing with the next wave of what you're doing? How are you embracing the uncertainty with new ideas?
So 2 very fun questions. Question number 1, the influences that created impact theory were, at 12 years old, my dad made a comment that he thought that I was good behind a camera. That leads me to film school. Film school leads me to abject poverty and absolute desperation and a fear that I would never make anything of my life, and that I had no idea how to break into an industry. This is all before YouTube. And met these 2 entrepreneurs who said, you're coming to the world with your hand out. If you want to control the art, you have to control the resources. And so why don't you come with us and get rich? I thought that sounded amazing. I thought it would take about 18 months. It took 15 years, but it did work. But in that period of time, I was changed fundamentally. So when I was 19, I big brothered for a kid in the inner cities, and I didn't know how to help him. I knew how to show him that somebody loved him, but I didn't know how to help him. Flash forward 15 years later, and I've got 3,000 employees. 1,000 of them remind me of this kid. They've all grown up in the inner cities, like hard, like crazy stories you can't imagine. Things like holding your stepfather while he bleeds to death from a gunshot wound to the head, or your sister getting shot in the heart with an AK-47 in your front yard. I mean, just insane story after story like that. And I start asking, okay, I've changed my life financially. It's crazy. I know that this stuff can be taught. I was not a born entrepreneur. How do you begin to implement this? And I tried just teaching people. So literally sitting down with them and saying, think like this, act like this, and you can be successful. And that worked with 2% of the people that encountered those ideas. And it was amazing. And watching them change their life was insanely gratifying. But I'm obsessed with scale. So I asked, how do I get to the other 98%? And to get to the other 98%, it's got to be, you have to bypass the logical brain and get to the limbic system. The only way to do that is through narrative. That brought me back to my first love anyway, which was filmmaking, storytelling. I thought this is perfect. So my wife and I decided to see if we could take somebody who was growing up in the inner cities, whose zip code is the most predictive thing of their future success, more than their IQ, let that sink in, and change it by giving them what Carol Dweck would call a growth mindset. And could we make things that were just entertaining, that you'd never think about, like The Matrix changed my life. Star Wars changed my life because of the philosophy. It's real. And if you deploy it in your life will be better. And we thought, could we do what Disney did, which is tell only one kind of story, but tell it from 1,000 different angles? And that the sum total, instead of Americana, which is what Disney outputs, could we output growth mindset? Now, most people won't even know that that's the value system that they're getting from our content, because we don't ever want people to feel like they're being preached to. But could we do that? And so that became the rallying cry, was we were going to build the next Disney, and our output was going to be a growth mindset. And so that's how that all started. In terms of how I think about facing challenges and the uncertainty of the way that things change, I think entrepreneurs that end up being successful are ones that train themselves to be excited about solving puzzles. And so I look at everything. Ken said at the top that I like Japanese comics. I never intended to like Japanese comics. It was just, that's where the industry led me. So I knew I wanted to build the next Disney. I'm going to need to survive a 1 in 20 hit ratio, which means 19 of the things that I do fail. One of them is going to work, but that one will work so well, that it's massive. And if you look at the top 25 highest grossing media properties of all time, something like 17 of them started as children's entertainment, comic book or something like Star Wars. And looking at those 17, an ungodly number of them were from Japan. And I was like, what is going on? And so as you look at the US comic market, which is fundamentally broken, and I promise you is about to die, and you look at the Japanese comic market, which is thriving, I just thought, okay, they're doing something that I need to learn about. And so I immersed myself in the world of what's called manga and began to learn the art form, began to understand why it's working in a way that the US market isn't working. And because I love that puzzle solving, I didn't go, because I grew up on comics, I was a collector. So to have my first book in print and to be able to go to my local comic shop and see a comic book that we created, I was over the moon. But the reality was the economics of it just weren't going to work. And I could project out into the future and say, this is going to be a failure, even though we're technically winning. We're getting distribution, we're getting purchased, but it's just so poorly done as an industry that even if we're the #1 selling book, it's still going to be a failure. And the willingness to look at that, because I like solving the puzzle and then not caring what the answer was, just wanting the answer to be true, leads me to Japan, leads me to completely change my business model. A book called A Billion Wicked Thoughts makes me rethink about adults versus kids. And so we just shift on a dime, because my obsession isn't being right, and getting people to understand that's very, very important. Finding the right answer is all I care about. I don't care who it comes from. So the excitement over solving puzzles, the willingness to admit that I'm wrong and to look at what the right answer is, no matter where it comes from. And then to be the guy that doesn't just talk about it. I got my ass on a plane and flew to Tokyo and started meeting with people in Tokyo and saying, how do we fucking collaborate? And, to Ken's earlier point about, I'm good at getting people to drink Kool-Aid. So flying to Japan and having to convince Japanese people that, hey, you want to be doing business with this random American that you've never seen before in your life. That's what I'm good at. And so beginning to build those relationships, but it comes down to that obsession over puzzles.
There you go. Great answer. Let's go over to Nisha. Our Natish, where are you? I had you. And then
I'm right here.
All right, there you go. Go for it, buddy.
Yep, I think you kind of answered my question with what you're saying, but I'll ask two other questions anyway. So where is impact theory and where are you in the entertainment space 10 years from now, looking at 2030? And that's my first question. The second question is, how important is manifestation to achieving your goals, and how did that play a role in your life to where you are today and where you're going?
Okay, so the first part of the question, in 2030, we'll have, I don't know, call it 3 or 4 high budget productions on a streaming service, whatever streaming service is the biggest service. So right now I would say Netflix. Who knows if that's going to be Disney Plus or whatever, or some combination of the top performing streaming services. We will also have multiple unscripted shows, so reality shows, but again, with the punchline of empowerment. And that will be our primary focus. Now, manifestation, that is it's maybe a variant of what I think actually matters. So the thing that I think matters is what I call the only belief that matters. If you read Think and Grow Rich, there's one point to take away, which is if you believe you can, you can. If you believe you can't, you can't. And that to me is one of those, it's self-evidently true because of this, the only belief that matters. The only belief that matters is if you put time and energy into getting better at something, you will actually get better at it. Now, imagine the world really does bifurcate into 2 kinds of people. Type 1 believes that no matter what you do, you're not going to get any better. Your talent and intelligence are fixed traits. And so life is just about making the most of what you have. And then the other side says, no, you can get better at anything that you apply your energies to. And the quote that I think best sums that side up is, you can't make a racehorse out of a pig, but you can make a really fast pig. So I'm not saying that you can beat, Michael Jordan at basketball or LeBron James at basketball, but I am saying that you can get 10 times better than you are now. So whatever it is that you want to do, imagine if you 10-folded your income. Imagine if you 10-folded your sales. Imagine if you 10-folded your leadership abilities. I assure you, all of that is not only possible, it's possible because you're an average human. I do not need you to be extraordinary. I'm not saying the extraordinary among us can 10-fold their abilities. I'm saying every species chooses a path. Path 1 is to pre-wire everything. So a horse, 20 minutes after it's born, it's up, it's running around, jumping, doing all the things that a horse is going to do. Human beings, your brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25. We have the longest childhood or development period. That's a better way to say it. We have the longest development period of any species ever on the planet. So when you realize the reason that you have that is so that you can adapt to your unique environment. Now, when you understand you can create a unique, even just mental environment in which to get good at something, right? Steve Jobs, born 1,000 years ago, does not make the iPhone, okay? He was not born to make the iPhone. He was shaped by his surroundings, the time period that he grew up in, and chose to get really good at that thing, right? So all of us are choosing something to get good at. The problem is some people don't believe that they can actually get good. So to me, it's not about manifesting in as much as it's saying the world will bend to the will of those with the greatest skill set. Now the name of the game is go get a fucking great skill set. But most people don't think about skills. And so my obsession is to get people to understand skills have utility. They let you do something. So if you're not spending an obscene amount of your time developing a very specific skill set designed to get you to the goal that you want, you're in trouble. So you need to know what your goal is. So if you want to call that visualization, great. I'm all for it. You got to know what your goal is. You've got to be able to believe that you can get there, because if you don't believe it, then you won't try to put time and energy into getting that superior skill set. And if you don't put energy into getting the superior skill set, you never will. And you will get beaten by me and people like me every time, because I spend all day, every day getting new skills.
Powerful. Let's go to CK.
Hey, Tom, big fan of yours. Thank you for being here. So let's concretize what you just said a little bit. On your podcast, many times you say you're an introvert, and you're the most emphatic, self-expressed introvert that I know of. So can you concretize what practice you did to be so emphatic? And the second part of the question would be, would you contribute that this quality of yours to be the reason why your audience so magnetized to you?
Okay, so part one. One, I think it is very important to note that I find it very easy to shift between introversion and extroversion. It is just that my default state is to be introverted. So what do I mean by that? I don't mean that I'm shy. I'm not shy. What I mean is that my highest highs are when I'm alone. So when I'm alone and writing, there's nothing that compares to that for me. And that has been a tremendous source of relief to know that everything else could fail in my life. But if you give me a tiny little hovel that I can live in, and you give me a pad of paper that I can write on, and I can get into that creative space, then if I have that and my wife, like, I've got everything that I need. So that's important to note. So what I realized was, skills have utility. Being extroverted is required if I'm going to galvanize these people and get them pointed in a direction. And I've talked a lot about momentum. In business, one of the great talents a CEO must have is the ability to create momentum. Now, momentum is not just moving quickly. Momentum is getting a large group of people pointed in the same direction and moving quickly. That's momentum. So it's hard to create momentum by yourself. In fact, the number one thing you would do if you were by yourself and you wanted to create momentum is you'd go get other people excited about your vision. You get on the plane, you fly to Japan, and you get other people there excited about what you're doing so that they then help you create the momentum. Because it really is going to be impossible to do something on a grand scale without the buy-in from a lot of people. The last part of the question was, what makes my audience galvanized towards me? Honestly, I've thought a lot about this. And I think what attracts people to me is twofold. One, I was not the person voted most likely to succeed. My own mother quietly thought that I was going to fail. My father-in-law told me he did not want me to marry his daughter. My best friend said, and I quote, "I thought you would just marshmallow your way through life." I went through a really dark period in my early to mid 20s where I was just watching TV in the mornings, music videos to be very specific, and laying in bed for 4 and 5 hours a day, every day. And it really was like shame and not wanting my girlfriend to look at me the way she was beginning to look at me that finally like got me going. So people can relate to, I didn't start special. There was nothing like, about me that people were like, oh yeah, this guy's the one to watch. So I can come from a very real place of like, I know what it's like to be sliding towards depression and then turn it around. So there's hope in that, where people go, oh, well, he's no better than me and he figured this out. So that's a huge part of it. And then the other part is that I am highly verbal. So I'm able to articulate ideas very, very clearly. And if I could throw in a third, I have an obsessive mind. So when I grab onto something, I loop around it a lot. And I come to understand it. So you start with somebody who started broken, developed him into something through sheer force of will, and not only can explain it, but can give you the step-by-step things that you need to do. And the step-by-step things that I give you, if you do them, they will work, and they will work every time. So the number of people that then come back into the system that are like, you changed my life, and they're crying, and they grab me when I'm walking down a hall back in the days when we could actually move around the world. It's crazy. And so it just becomes this sort of what I'll call the Tony Robbins effect of, it actually impacts your life. Like Tony Robbins changed my life. And so when Me Too came after Tony, I was like, good luck. The number of people out there that are going to say, all right, Tony Robbins might be an axe murderer, but he changed my life. So, I don't really care. And when the advice is real and you can articulate it well, and people can feel that you want good things for them, then it pops off.
There you go. I like how you have very, very quick, to the point answers, Tom.
Well, thank you, sir.
I'm joking. They're not. They're awesome.
I don't speak in bumper stickers. I will definitely say that.
Let's go to Akira, who's sitting in Estonia. Akira, go for it.
Hey, Tom, this is all really great. And yeah, I will say I have a lot of love and respect for everything you and Lisa put out around relationships. I'm happy to say that my first physical comic that I held in my hand after probably like since I was 16 years old was Neon Future, which was the first issue of the collaboration you did with Steve Aoki, right? And when you were on Metal Saturday and you went into your whole vision around graphic novels and comics and films and all of that working together, a few guys that in the group were like, we were all texting each other like, oh my God, he's talking about, this transmedia, like, format strategy, because I'm developing a transmedia project with a couple guys in metal. And we were just like, wow, I didn't know Tom was so passionate about this. So can you explain more of that? Because on the surface, it seems like everything is 100% all in with impact theory. But, when you were on metal, you revealed that that's like step one. And there was this whole amazing vision behind all of that.
Yeah, so I recorded a video, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago now, called My Master Plan. And I recorded it for a couple reasons. One, I wanted people to understand why we were launching. I think this is when we were launching Impact Theory University, maybe. And I wanted people to understand why I was doing it. And then the other was I wanted people to see that I called my shot, because I will pull this off. And this is a shot that I called with my wife probably about 7 years ago now. And I laid out the plan. I told her exactly that. This was deep in Quest. I laid out exactly the plan, how this was going to work, how this was all going to add up and come together. And when we pull this off and people see how long ago I put this in motion, and how not only was it like a step-by-step that I could walk people through, I actually did walk people through it, and I put it up on the video. So here's how it works. I think I mentioned this earlier. It's what I call the physics of progress. There are just certain true things about making progress in a given arena. And it's basically using the scientific method to identify what you need to do. So what I realized was, if we're going to break into Hollywood, we need to be able to create IP that allows us to retain a certain amount of control in the negotiation. And because nobody knew who I was. So I needed a two-part strategy. One, I needed to build up my profile, because remember, 5 years ago, I was the protein bar guy. Now, nobody wants to make a movie with the protein bar guy, right? You would just sort of automatically write that guy off. So my goal was to reach out and change enough lives that if I said I was going to go and pitch something at Netflix, and I asked 5,000 people to go stand in the parking lot at Netflix saying, buy this project from Tom, that they would actually do it. So that was why I stepped in front of the camera and started doing this, because I was like, I know that I can change people's lives, and I know that then they will feel some kind of way about me and what I'm trying to do. So that was sort of part one. My company knew from day one, I said, don't ever think I'm trying to be the next Tony Robbins. I'm trying to be the next Walt Disney. You're going to get confused, because for the first few years, we're going to be doing all this mindset stuff. But the reality is, what we care about, because that's the 2% of people, what we care about is the 98%. So to tell a story, I've got to be able to fail 19 out of 20 times, which means that I need to be able to fail cheaply. The cheapest way to fail is what's called a light novel. So we're looking at buying a light novel company. It's a long story. I won't go into it. The next cheapest way is comic books. Now, I didn't know the industry, so I came in and thought I would be doing a traditional Western comic, which is what I grew up with. So we learned how to do that. I knew nothing about making them. We learned how to create comics. We got them distributed through sheer force of will, and they doubled expectations. And at that point, I had learned enough about the industry to project. And I said, even if we're the #1 book, this is a failure. So I started asking the question of who's winning. That led me to Japan, beginning to understand the distribution model that would work. You need to find a way to make money off your failures. So that's a key part of breaking into Hollywood. Is if you only live for the one film that you get sold that actually makes it, because most films that you sell don't actually end up getting produced. So you get these guys that make an entire career out of making things that never get produced. And, as you can imagine, with my mission, that's just not interesting to me whatsoever. Even if you told me I can make $1 billion doing that, I would have zero interest in that. So we knew that we wanted to focus on actually getting things made, which means that we had to retain a certain amount of control, which means that we have to, on one of the earlier phases, build up enough interest around the project that we can come in and have some control. And there's obviously countless examples, Marvel and Disney being the most extraordinary example. But going back to the 25 highest grossing media properties of all time, 17 of them started out in some form or another as either a print book like Winnie the Pooh, which is one of them, or a comic book like Batman, which is one of them, or manga, which is like 6 or 7 of them. And so that also would give us the ability to make money even on our failures. So that was the sort of notion behind that. I don't know if there's more clarity you want around that, but that was sort of how we pieced together the strategy.
Guys, before we dive into other questions, I want to take a few more moments with Tom on things you're not talking about that I think are important. You're looking at Tom today. You need to go back to where Tom was. So he did start off with the software space. He did say he came to LA because he wanted to make movies. But the software space is what gave him, I think, the baseline knowledge of what it takes to start a business that had an exit. You may have not made a lot on the exit, but it at least gave you it was the boot camp. It was the necessary boot camp to put you in the next war, which was Quest. And then from Quest, you were able to move into impact theory. I think we need to really focus on those starting points. For example, Tom, my first business, I got funded by VCs. I raised about $30 million plus media from Silicon Valley venture capitalists in the early 2000s, 1998, not realizing how much a venture capitalist becomes so active in the role of a company, and in some cases takes away the vision and replaces it with their vision. Okay. When you started your software company, how did you raise money? What would you have done differently? And I know you weren't satisfied with the exit, but were you satisfied with the exit that you got in the experience?
Yeah, that was life-changing. So I got hired as a copywriter. I didn't even found the company.
Wow. Okay.
Got hired as a copywriter, and they gave me a pitch. Hey, don't think of yourself as a copywriter, act like a partner. And if you act like a partner, we'll actually make you a partner. And I took them seriously, and they made good on their word. And by the time that we exited that company, I was a partner. We raised money the traditional way, but we were total morons and had no idea how to do it. And I actually shouldn't say that we raised money. We sold the company. So we were trying to raise money and we just couldn't pull it off because we did not know what we were doing. And we were telling VCs, and I quote, this was a company born to sell. Like, we're just basically trying to get rid of it. We just wanted to raise money. And we thought VCs would be like, oh, amazing, we can come in and take control. This will be great. Which of course they want an entrepreneur that's willing to die for the business. And so us saying that, like, oh yeah, do whatever you want, just made it sound like we thought they would love it. And they were like, this is a joke. So we struggled and struggled and struggled. And finally, one of the guys that we were pitching to either buy the company or invest was like, yeah, I'm just going to buy this from you guys. I want to come on as CEO. So I do want to be the one with the vision, but I need you guys to help me run it. And the way that worked was he came in, bought the company. We gladly put him in position of CEO, and he and I did not see eye to eye. And he said that marketing was spreadsheets, and I said marketing was storytelling. And it's one of the most sort of gratifying moments of my life. I said, cool, if we don't see eye to eye and you're comfortable, then I will transition out and I'll go start Quest. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. So we were mutually very respectful about it. And I gave him the time that they needed to transition everything over and all that. And I moved out. I was the first of the 3 partners at Awareness to leave and go to Quest full time. And then of course we know how Quest turns out, ends up being $1 billion company. And he ends up admitting that, okay, yeah, you're right. Marketing is more storytelling. Now it actually is. Spreadsheets are important, but it's far more storytelling than it is spreadsheets. And so that was how we made the money. And leaving at that point, I wanted out. I wanted out whether I got anything or not. And in fact, had gone to my partners. And the reason we started the process to sell or raise growth capital was I went to my partners and said, I quit. I can't do this anymore. I'm not interested. Like, this is draining my life away. Because I was just chasing money, right? This was me in the period where I'm trying to get rich. And they say, look, we feel the same. We're frustrated. We're not happy here either. We want to do something we're passionate about as well. So what would have to be true for us to work together? And the answer to that question ended up being Quest. And so awareness technologies was wildly pivotal because it was so painful. And I really did hate it, but it ended up becoming, you know, this tremendous gift because it showed me that I wasn't willing to chase money anymore. It gave me all the insights that we ended up using to build Quest.
So Business Rockstars, which was my broadcast company, I was a partner with a guy named Steve Lehman. Really, really respected him, but we had very different business ethics. And that's why we parted ways. We parted ways because I believe the relationship was more valuable than the financial arrangement of the relationship, meaning everybody in his mind was transactional. And I saw it as long-term. So I parted ways. And in that process, he misrepresents me. Okay. So anytime someone hears, oh, Steve, oh, they said negative things. Now I know Ron and Mike, your former partners at Quest. They don't represent you properly. How do you work with that situation?
I don't really think about it, to be honest. At the end of the day, it's like the way that we all move through the world. It's like you're going to make a reputation for yourself. So if somebody's met me, then I'm cool. Like what you take away is what you take away. If you've only heard about me, then I don't really worry about that. And you know, look, it was such a beautiful experience with my former partners. And man, I would not take it back for the world. But ultimately, we came to a point where we just didn't share a vision for how to move forward with the company. And so we parted ways. But it's like, dude, I don't know. I'm one of those people that, like, even if it ended in divorce, it was like still such a beautiful relationship while it lasted. And so it was transformational for me. It was such an amazing period. And I learned so much from working with those guys that, yeah, I've got nothing but warm feelings for that time, for them. So, you know, we each are going to tell ourselves the story about what we saw that we're going to tell ourselves. And that is what it is. But dude, for me, it was just life-changing and has set me up to do what I'm doing now. And I am beyond grateful.
You know, one of my best friends in the world is Jim Quick, who's a good friend of yours. And you could tell a person based upon the people they surround themselves with. And boy, you have classy people around you all the time. And you really do. But then it goes to that question. You always want to be the dumbest person in the group you're hanging out with. It gets kind of hard after a while because you're always advancing yourself. How do you now go to another level to where you start to go, I got to find people smarter than me, but everyone around me is pretty freaking smart. How do you get to another level?
You know, the interesting thing is I've reinvented myself every sort of 8 years or so. Not necessarily even intentionally, just that seemed like the most logical move at the time. And I am haunted by a quote, which is genius is a young man's game. And I've always been really bothered by that because I've always felt like a late bloomer. And so, you know, now in my early, I guess now mid 40s, I really want my best years to be in front of me. And so one of the ways to make sure that you're always the dumbest person in the room is just be going in a new room, into a room that you don't know anything about. And what I have found is the biggest successes in my life have been where two new things have interacted. So coming into the nutrition space from, you know, software, we saw opportunities other people didn't see. And because we just had a totally different background. And then the same as now as I'm stepping into media, one of the reasons I was able to move away from the US comic market so quickly was I was coming out of retail, man, selling, you know, protein bars to tens of thousands of points of distribution and knowing how it should work, knowing the metrics you should get, the data, like what a good distribution partner looks like, and then partnering up with the only distribution partner in comics and just being like, this is so fundamentally and profoundly broken. Unless that changes like at just a core level, it's never going to work. And having the insight, because I had been elsewhere, was very, very useful. So if you put yourself into a position where you are just the student in all things, because really true, not just the mentality of being a student, but like you actually are a student, you don't know enough about this. It gets pretty easy to be surrounded by really bright people. So if I ever stay in one place long enough, maybe I will find myself, but I'm so paranoid about sliding into dogma Or maybe I'm just too dumb that I don't run into that problem. I'm not sure.
Not true. That's not true. Look, Stuart, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Tom. First off, I really appreciate what you've built at Impact Theory. It's definitely helped me and a number of friends go from being demoralized about the future to very optimistic. So one of my favorite episodes is The Secret to Abundance with Ken Honda. And you mentioned that you're looking for people who understand investing in non-traditional terms to help the average person improve themselves. So I'm wondering, how is that going and what have you been learning?
So I went through a real period of frustration at a point when that episode was coming out. So COVID had kicked off and I felt like the economy, if you thought of it as a person, the economy had been shot in the gut and it still was alive, but it was bleeding and bleeding badly. And nobody seemed to understand that we were treating the wound, but that it had still been shot. And I was really worried for the average person. And I was like, obviously this is not something I have to worry about. But I think average people are going to get mauled by what's coming. I still think that's true. And so I was really trying to get a hold of these incredible financial minds and get them to give people like basic building block information that people can use to weather the storm that's coming. And I have like really basic, simple things that I would encourage people to do, but I really had hoped that some of these just tremendous financial minds would be able to give them something. And I began to realize most of them, Ken maybe being the one exception, most of them are dealing at a high level. And they have a very hard time getting down to like how to deal with the cost of bread or rent or renegotiating your lease agreement. Like that's not where they're at. It's not where they live. And so I found that to be a really fruitless chase with, precious few exceptions. There is one person that I think is quite good at it, Noah Kagan. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he is just an extraordinary voice of like basic shit, how to keep your expenses down, how to generate money today, how to get on a phone and make a sale today. So between him and Ken Honda, those were the two people that gave me glimmers of hope. But I will say that I think we have a reckoning coming and I think it's going to be gnarly. And I hope that somebody can become the voice of that.
Tom, again, I really appreciate you giving us some time. We have a few moments left with Tom. So if you have a question, please put it inside the chat. I'm going to try to get to you. Hirosh, it's your turn. Go for it, buddy.
Hey, Tom.
Hello.
How you doing? So my question is, I'm a big fan of graphic novels and comics and actually transmedia in general. And so what I posted here was, what are your thoughts about the global emerging audience and actually focusing on Asian countries and emerging markets like India and China and Southeast Asia, as opposed to, I know you're working in Japan, but them being like the next wave of global consumers in this particular marketplace?
Yeah, so on that, I am really, really bullish that that's where the big movement is right now. They're about 10 years ahead of us. So I thought Japan was going to be the dominant force, but they've actually allowed dogma to sort of lock them in, and Korea now is overtaking them. And if you look at what the Korean companies have done with like Webtoon, which Naver Webtoon, I don't know how many people know about that, but Naver is more or less like their version of Google. So it's this massive company that understood that at least in the Korean market, there's as much time spent reading what's called manhwa, which is a comic book, but on your phone. There's as much time spent reading these comics as there are watching videos. So imagine in the US, if we really are trailing by 10 years, that if 10 years from now, as many people will be reading these comic books as are reading or watching YouTube videos. So that is, they understand the technology better. They have adopted it from a user-based perspective much more rapidly, but storytelling is very unique to the cultures. So for me to make a comic book in Japan, I would be working with Japanese creators. For me to make a comic book in China, I'd need to be working with Chinese creators. Same with India. And if you just try to go in and make a Western comic work in those areas, they fail. And that is very daunting. So first, we need to build up our base in the US. We've got 2 hits so far on Webtoon here in the US. very excited about the early success that we've seen. But when we're say 10 deep and we're really cooking there, then I would start looking at working with other talent. And one of the ways we'll do that is Japanese stories translate very well to the US in a way that US stories do not translate to Japan. So right now we're working with basically editors in Japan to identify talent, and we'll create a webtoon in Japanese that will never release in Japanese. It will release in English. And that's something that's been happening in the anime industry for a long time. But that is one of the ways that we're looking to do that expansion. But we keep a very close eye on what countries give us the most traffic. So India for us is massive, much bigger than China. And being able to step into that as something, very forward facing is very exciting. I mean, just the numbers they're so crazy. It's really exciting.
I was just going to say, the only thing is that the distribution model there is completely broken. I've been talking to so many distributors over there, and it's
well, are
still
you thinking print?
Well, print is a whole different scenario, right? Because that's been around for like decades in India. Like people don't realize that one of the oldest comics is like 75 years old. But the reality is like that's a dying industry. Now it's about getting onto your smartphone and digital
Correct.
technology and digital distribution, which is a huge market. And that audience is like somewhere between the ages of like 14 to 30. And that's a whole new audience that doesn't even go to the print media. They weren't even raised on those original comic books that came up from like 1950s and 60s. So yeah, it's a huge different market in India, but yeah, it's something I've been studying for quite a long time. So I really appreciate
Good
it.
stuff. I like that.
Absolutely.
Let me go to our race car driver, Mr. Servia.
Hello. Hey, Tom, thanks for giving us an hour, man. Much appreciated. I have two questions. One, as a CEO, are you driving the vision or are you raising money? And then second, coming from software and media, I'm a former IndyCar driver, but I'm in a software company now that we bring e-commerce inside video. And as we're speaking, I did a quick demo that I put here on the comments with one of your videos and your store. Where do you see the next e-commerce, video commerce phase?
So when I think about where e-commerce is going, to me, it's all going to be mobile device. So finding a way to do, and obviously I come at it from a media perspective. So if you think about in-game transactions, microtransactions, that's something that we're watching closely. One of the models in our area is Webtoon, allows you to do this thing called a fast pass. And that has been really, really successful. People do not understand how much a successful creator on Webtoon is making, but it is truly extraordinary. They gave me some numbers in confidence, so I can't say what they are, but they would just absolutely stagger a Western creator who has no concept of just how much money you can make in microtransactions. So that's something that we pay a lot of attention to. And then for us, I think advertising is going to continue to be huge. And for us, that is whether it's an ad that we sell and I record the commercial for it, or it's just Google or YouTube dynamically inserting an ad, that I think that's going to continue to be big. And so as the sort of amateurization of the content creation continues and fragments more and more and more, right? We no longer have 30 million people or 70 million people or whatever it was that watched the finale of MASH. We don't get that anymore. We get all these like small niched places, but as that continues to happen, you're going to get the re-aggregation of those ads. People are going to get more savvy about using big data to serve ads. Like, I don't know if you guys are running ads with Facebook, but it is really extraordinary how they can target like these 7 people are going to buy your product, and they'll serve that ad and those 7 people buy your product. It's crazy. Now, identifying the right markets becomes the magic. But it is like, to me, that's the future in terms of where e-commerce is going in terms of microtransactions, and then in terms of how a content creator monetizes is going to be through the advertising.
More ads than purely buying on screen eventually?
I am shocked at how I thought for sure Instagram was going to show that they could solve that problem overnight and that they would make it available to everybody. And I don't know if it's because it's not working very well or if they're just being really cautious about it. But they're making it so hard for a publisher to sell through the platform that when it first came out, I was like, team, gather around. This is the future. You have no idea. This is going to change everything. And then this is now almost 2 years later, and they're still not rolling it out wide. So I don't know the inner workings of why it hasn't worked, but that seems dead simple. When you get to the point where you can buy through your social feed as easily as you can buy on Amazon, that'll be game over for retail. Because you'll see it out in the wild as somebody's wearing it, using it, whatever, and you can click on it and it tells you this is this shirt from this place, and you don't have to go to their website. You just click it and it's yours. That will change everything. But there appear to be stumbling blocks that I'm just not aware of that are stopping that from going wide, and I don't know why.
Guys, we're just going to do 3 more questions. It's going to be Alex, Teddy, and then Jared. So let's go to Alex first. Alex?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for being here today.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it. I think we met briefly at Craig Clement's house like about a year and a half ago.
Ah, yeah.
So I have a question for you. So what are the next steps for you as you get to the big studio performance level? What does that roadmap look like? From where you are today, where you want to be? What does that look like to you? What is that process?
So that's all about partnerships. So what we're trying to do, we've partnered with a company called LBI. They're one of the most prestigious management companies in Hollywood. They represent Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz, Martin Scorsese, Ryan Gosling. I mean, just like A-list. To work with them to package up different projects to get them sold. Because in Hollywood, it really isn't the idea, it's the package. And so being an outsider coming into Hollywood, the first thing you have to do is master the package. The other thing that we're working on simultaneously is creating the IP that we're actually going to package up. And so finding young, hungry, creative talent that we can get on board and then shepherding them. So I talked earlier about, every CEO needs to have that thing that they can do better than anyone else in their company. And one of the areas that I am incredibly strong is producing stories. So working with a writer to get the story to a place where it's going to move an audience, where it's going to be sellable. And then I'm also pitching is one of my strong suits. So helping to create that IP, having the right partner that can take us to build out these packages, and then in the room, being able to convince people that it's the right package. That's sort of the 3-part strategy that we're using to move forward.
Awesome, thank you.
Teddy?
Quick question. I think we have
Alex, we're real tight. Teddy?
Sure.
Hey, Tom. This has been an amazing meeting. Thank you for joining us. My question is who have you interviewed that you just were not expected to be so inspired by, that sort of blew your mind? And is there anyone who you still want to bring on to Impact Theory, who you dream of?
Ken Rakowski, and I'm available, Tom.
That's exactly right. The person that surprised me the most was David Goggins. So I didn't know who he was. And my team pitched him and said, you got to look into this guy. He's insane. You're going to love his mindset. So he, honestly, researching him changed my life. That guy is so hardcore. And when I think about his concept of when you think you are broken and could not possibly go any farther, you're actually only 40% of the way there. And this is a guy that finished Buds on a broken leg. Imagine that. He went into Buds with a broken leg. I can't fathom that. So it is, that really inspired me. The person that I want to get on the show, because I really feel like the world needs his voice right now, is Jordan Peterson. When he first came on the scene, I didn't know him, and I'd never heard of him. And my marketing guy was like, oh man, I hear this guy's like a right-wing nut job. And so I was like, well, I don't want right-wing nut job, so forget it. And then I kept hearing all this stuff about Jordan Peterson, so controversial. And finally I was like, I don't even know what this guy looks like. So let me go watch a video. And I watched the video and I was like, this is amazing. I was like, this guy is phenomenal. And I just went deeper and deeper in his world. I read his first book, which most people have not read, called Maps of Meaning. That's extraordinary. 12 Rules for Life is extraordinary. He is a deeply interesting guy. And he's got all this darkness about him. He says I'm pessimistic, and he's I think that's part of why people resonate with me. I'm the most optimistic human you will ever meet. And so I don't know, there's something about him that like cosmically balances me out. I am desperate to get him on the show. He has obviously struggled very profoundly in the last year. But oh man,
I get
I'd
it.
love to have him on.
I'm with you on that too. And last question's coming from Jared. Jared, go for it.
Hey, Tom. First of all, thank you. This is amazing. Everything I ever see from you is always fantastic, and my life is always enriched because of it. So thank you for everything you do. My question is, I'm with an organization called Veterans in Media and Entertainment, and we have a department that's dedicated to helping veterans to transition out of active duty, whether they've been in the career for 20, 10, 15 years, into the entertainment industry. It's an educational nonprofit organization. And we have members, 2,500 members in LA, and it's anywhere from studio executives on to the brand new guy who's never done anything. So I would just ask if there's any way that your organization looks to reach out to veterans, or if you're looking for opportunities to maybe bridge that gap. If so, I'd love to do that. And also, I was in a program called the Veterans Writing Program at the Writers Guild Foundation, and they also helped mentor new writers. Some of them are very talented coming out of the gate. They get writers staffing jobs. So that's also a relationship I'd be willing to bridge if that's something that interests your company. But I just wanted to plant that seed, see if that's of interest, and just say thank you for everything you do, and thank you for showing up for Metal. It's been amazing, and I know we all appreciate it. Thank you.
Man, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. Ken, always, man, truly a pleasure. I would be very interested. I will take a good idea from wherever it comes, but being able to help people that have served this country is something that I feel really strongly about and have done essentially nothing. So that could be really, really interesting. But yeah, if you've got any connects with people that can write. So I have a fantasy. So I really believe that the time, like Hollywood has become sort of this impenetrable black box and people don't know how to get in. And the reality is it all starts with a small group of people that are very talented and can help each other. And so I'm trying to put together that group using some new technologies that are starting to pop off like Discord, to bring creatives together, to give them tools. And I think a whole new breed of storyteller is going to be coming into Hollywood, because I think Hollywood is sort of backing itself into a corner, and they're making more and more political stuff instead of things that speak to the human spirit and really entertain. So in any moment of disruption is a moment of tremendous opportunity. So man, if you can help me put together that, band of creators, I would be extraordinarily grateful.
Everyone do me a favor. Can you unmute yourself and thank Tom for sharing time with us? Tom, thank you so much, buddy. And everyone, thank you very much. Bye, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Guys, thanks for having me. It was
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you.